Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Kifer Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our new guest, Joshua Kifer. We're here to break down Fyrebite Studio and their brand new game, The Secrets of Hope. And this was depressing as hell, Josh. Oh my goodness. I dived into this. I was like, this is gorgeous looking. I was like, and then you start diving a little bit deeper into the level. It's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can hold this together. But before we dive into the sadness that is this game, let's begin with the basics of who you are and how you got into creating indie games.
Yeah. So I'm Josh Kifer, and I started actually working in the game industry a couple of years ago. I started working in the startup company AIM Labs, which was real big in the esports industry. So worked with them as a quality assurance engineer. I still do quality assurance for a game studio as like my day job. But so we basically started dabbling in Unity as a quality assurance engineer. And then I decided that one day I just wanted to make a game out of the blue, started messing around in Unity completely as a solo dev. And it expanded kind of into what it is now. And there's a small team of us that are actually working on The Secrets of Hope currently. Yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it. I just kind of started messing around in Unity one day.
That is awesome. So basically you were doing quality testing and making sure everything was playing properly, and one thing led to another, and you're like, I'm just going to start creating it.
Yeah, so I basically did like the exact opposite of making a game. I tried to break everyone's game and go through code and figure out what was wrong and analyze games critically, and then provide feedback to the developers on how to do that. And over time, after looking at code for so much and playing and trying to break a game so much, it's somewhat easy to reverse engineer that and start making it.
So what goes into breaking it? I mean, I broke a couple controllers here and there, but when you're trying to break the game, what are you doing? Are you just trying to bust through walls or try to make glitches pop out?
Yeah, so I would say, at its core, you look at UI or level design stuff, right? So if you were doing quality assurance, let's say on Valorant or Counter-Strike, or can you shoot through walls? Can you jump through walls? Can you glitch through the map? That's your very rudimentary testing, what you can see with your eyes, and this is clearly broken and it's not working as intended. And then going a deeper layer into that then is looking more so on a debug console. It's throwing these errors when this happens, or Unity's real good for null reference errors. So it's throwing a null reference error, and why is it throwing this error, and back end optimization stuff as well.
So I mean, are you just rolling and jumping into every wall you see, or is there some sort of guide for you to look off of? This sounds like it could get pretty sweaty.
No, so essentially within quality assurance, you build out test cases. Most of the time there'll be from the production or from design, they'll be okay, this is our vision of how this is supposed to work in our game. And then the engineers make the game based off of that vision. And then we take that vision as well, and we write cases to test against what could possibly go wrong, or if it's not aligned to the vision. If the designer says that you're supposed to click this button and this happens, and then when you're testing it, you click the button and something completely different happens, then that's a bug in the industry.
Okay. That is so interesting. I mean, I think a majority of people who haven't got into the field probably just know what they know from Grandma's Boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that, kind of not like that. There's not as many theatrics to it. It's not nearly as fun. I mean, at one point in time, I remember I was the settings guy. So all I did for an 8-hour shift was test settings menus. So more of that mundane. In fact, I have one of my coworkers at my last job worked for Nintendo of America, and right around the time when Animal Crossing came out, and his job at Nintendo for Animal Crossing was to dig holes in every spot of the map that you could actually dig holes in with the shovel. And that's all he did for a week straight, was just dig holes over and over and over and over and over again to make sure that you could dig everywhere that you were supposed to be able to dig.
But the thing is, you get to walk away saying you worked on Animal Crossing for Nintendo. I mean,
right. So it has its perks, it has its moments. It's not a lot of people I know, like, the end goal is I want to work in the game industry, and I'm extremely privileged and happy to be in the game
Hmm.
industry. But it also has its moments of like the mundane as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So it's not all what cherries and roses. There is a little bit of thorns
Right.
here and there, but I think that is with everything that is good in life, right? There's a little
Yeah.
catch to everything. So let's talk a little bit about Fyrebite Studio. When did the creation of this come about?
So that would have been March of 2022. So we just hit our year
Wow,
actually.
congratulations.
Yeah, it started just me. I did not want to self-publish under like my own name, as
Hmm.
like a lot of indie devs do. So I came up with the name, I liked it, and I was like, I'm just going to like Firebite is going to be mine, and I will publish under like self-publish under Firebite. And then about 5 or 6 months into the development of the Secrets of Hope, one of my best friends, who'd always dabbled in Unity as well, his name's Chris Carr, and he's kind of our like lead engineer right now. I did a lot of the early coding of the game, and then he went in and fixed a lot of the spaghetti mess that I had made. Um, I pitched him the project basically, and I was like, "Look, man, like I can't pay you. Like, this is a passion project of
Hmm.
mine. So what I'll do is I'll do like 50% of the company or whatever. Like let's just be co-owners, and whatever happens with this thing happens with it." So he came in on that premise, and that's when development really picked up on the game like extremely fast, with two people working on it. And then about 2 months after that, we brought a modeler and like an art director on, which was another one of my like close friends of 20 years, and he actually has his master's in art, so a lot of the coloring and just the overall like color of the game
Hmm.
came from him. And then like I do most of like the creative level design style stuff. So I watched you play the demo, and most of that, the trees and environment and things that you're walking through in that forest, was a lot of it was there even before like my partners joined the studio. But
Beautiful
that's it.
trees, by the way.
Right.
Beautiful trees.
Oh, those trees were the bane of our existence
Hmm.
for a long time, because we're doing like a half low poly like retro feel, but it's also not. And billboarding was like the wind blowing the leaf. Billboarding was a nightmare on every single one of those trees because it was all like custom textures, and none of it worked right. It was
I
it was a
appreciate
mess.
you explaining that because when you said billboarding, I'm like, okay, I didn't see any billboards in there. Maybe I missed something. Like,
Oh yeah, all of the tree
hmm.
sway, like the wind zones in the coding, you would have like your tree, and then all of your leaves would like just be completely off of the trees. We spent hours on those trees. It was bad.
So speaking of the demo, I mean, I had the chance to play it. You watched it. I loved it. It was such a sad experience. I mean, it's about terminal cancer. Well, what was the reason that you created this?
So yeah, my I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather was more or less my father figure in my life. And I was probably about 16, 17 when he was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma, kind of out of the blue. And it was like the immediate let's go through chemo, the immediate let's fight this thing. And basically he spent like 97 days in the hospital, and then was more or less sent home to die. And for the next year, basically, I watched him kind of go through this like roller coaster of emotions. And he was a very like heavily Christian based man, but you see this turn point in him that was like, you know, crying out to God in the beginning, but then angry at God, and then
Yeah.
accepting like there's an emotional turn with that. So basically the whole premise of the game was, let me tell his story, and hopefully people find comfort at the end with like his acceptance. And Chris's grandfather had also passed away from cancer, so he was immediately drawn
Hmm.
into the story of this kind of unnamed male figure walking through this portion of his life. And there's really it has evolved kind of from this direct storytelling of my grandfather's life to more of a kind of loose adaptation of both me and Chris's grandfathers.
So was Lorraine like a nod to either one of your grandmothers?
I believe it was a nod to Chris's grandmother. Not my grandmother. So I don't know if we want to get into this part yet of kind of, so the demo that you played is really just a vertical slice of the entire game, right? It's 10 or 15 minutes that gives you just kind of like the core what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of those voice lines, even in the demo, aren't necessarily in the game. Like we basically cut out a little circle of that portion of the map, built a demo specifically with a demo intended in that area, but it's not like an overall reflection. Like the entire game will run you about 4 hours, I'd say, if you're taking it slowly. And there's really about 3 story arcs that kind of, there's like 3 paths essentially that run into the game, which we can go into now if like that's what you wanted to.
Man, just hearing the explanation, like my dad, when I remember being 9 and he was hit with stage 4 lung cancer out of the blue. Like we had no idea. It was one of those things like where it just hits you out of nowhere. And that roller coaster, like, holy crap. He was a biker. So I watched my big burly tattooed covered dad, like, just like, fighting cancer. He decided to fight at home too. So like the parallels there are just like, man, it's like, I'm getting goosebumps almost. Like
I grew up in a biker family too. I still ride, like personal life stuff. I still ride like almost every day. I mean, I live in Ohio, so.
Dude, I live in Ohio too. Did we ever talk about that?
I don't think so. We may have to talk about it after this podcast.
That's awesome, dude. Like that. What a small. Hold on, my camera's out. There we go. Out of focus. That's so weird. Why is it doing that? We good? We're good. And I can edit that out and clean that up in post production. So not a problem. So, I mean, this game. I when we walked up to the hospital bed and they pick up the chemo, it was just like. The attention to detail, in my head was like someone had to have experienced this. Like this is just hitting too close to home. So I mean, the music. I want to get into the mechanics, but the music, the OST was just as captivating as like the visual. Who do you have for doing the music?
So it's funny that you asked that. It kind of feels weird to like say it, but so that was curated by Chris. Like hours and hours and hours of. Just like curating the soundtrack and trying different tracks. But one of the things about the Secrets of Hope, and I'm okay with being transparent with everything, is we sort of lacked a level of degree of funding. I was very passionate about like not doing investors, not doing startup capital, not doing publishing or taking a publishing deal. And we also were really rocky about Kickstarter. It's something that we still even talk about to this day. That being said, though, I have 3 kids. Chris has kids. Like we didn't have a ton of money to pour into the Secrets of Hope, so we either had to make everything ourselves or lean into different types of like software applications or assets to try and make the game feel like ours, but also not being like labeled as an asset flip. So that soundtrack is actually a commercial license that we paid for from Epidemic Sound.
I mean, I don't think there's a lot of harm in that too, because with these indie studios, you only have what, 2 people working with you, 3?
Right. So we looked into like original music because none of us are like I play guitar. Like none of us are musically talented enough to curate like an entire orchestrated soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked into it, and I mean, it's $5,000 minimum. You can get into tens of thousands of dollars with a soundtrack. And obviously we're keeping a log of everything that we've spent. We're tracking all of our hours that we have put into the game. And as it stands right now, and like just transparency, the Secrets of Hope has been produced for around $50,000.
Wow.
And that includes a lot of hours as if we were to pay ourselves back. But with owning a business, like we're not going to see. But we would have to do above that in order for the game to really be considered like a success.
Yeah, and that's the side a lot of consumers don't see. What goes into it. Outside of the finished product.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's talk a little bit about these core gameplay mechanics. Now, I got just a taste of it with this demo, but what can we expect when this game fully releases?
Yeah, so I'll break down the kind of a little bit into what you saw in the demo too, and to kind of what it's like to play the game. So the forest scene that you played in the demo is actually the third scene or the third level of the game. So the game actually starts out in a house. You know, you and your wife, or you and your, we're trying to make the characters be as relatable as possible, and
Hmm.
almost as like, you know, not empty, but anybody can relate to them. So they're essentially up in their age. Their life has kind of come to that retirement age. They're settled in their house and they're looking forward to just like a life of children and grandchildren. And so you start in the house, and there are some points of interest and some interactable things. I wanted to do something originally very much like Dear Esther or Gone Home, where you have like the inspectable objects and like what you saw with the chemo bag. So you basically have that within the house scene. Obviously, you will receive a phone call, and that scene dramatically shifts, both visually and with like color. And then you will essentially, without trying to give away too much of the game, you end up in this forest scene, and you're very confused, obviously, as you saw in the demo, as to where you are. And how those stories kind of start playing through is you have your main story sequences, and those sequences are the ones that you see the like northern light beacon floating above. And that story, essentially, as you progress through those points of interest, tells a more broader grief acceptance and like emotional support, or like, you know, grief's counseling of just the broad range of having cancer or dealing with cancer.
So, I mean, in the beginning of the demo, we see that. Is that the house, the first area that you're talking about?
It is, yes, that house. And that's kind of a big key with some of those main scenes. And the secondary arc is a lot of the things that you see in the first half of the game reappear in the second half of the game in more kind of abstract, tucked within this, you know, surreal forest environment.
I love it. I love it. Like I said, I had a fantastic time playing it. It just, and you know, just the way that it like intertwines, it is a very relatable story. Like, it doesn't matter really, you know, who in your family has perished from cancer. Like, I feel like we all have lost someone, you know, and with that being said, you can relate very deeply to a game of this nature. You know, what type of games are you guys focusing on as a unit with, you know, your creation of the studio? Is it just going to be games like this, or are you looking at doing other titles too?
Yeah. So and I just want to touch on like the other two story arcs real quick, and then I'll answer your question. So like that's that main story arc of relatable to cancer, and then the secondary story arc is more so not, you won't find them unless you explore. We're
Yeah.
rewarding exploring. So those secondary scenes are more for our grandfathers. You'll find out more about your character's life in the game. And then those cards that you saw is the third component, where they're not necessarily a story arc, but every card that you read, and there was one that you missed in the demo.
I know.
Um,
I
every card
almost
that you
wanted to
read
replay.
is a user submitted story from somebody that's had cancer. Complete strangers have been sending us in
Oh,
their little, and I'm modeling every card to every person's request. So if that was something that any of your audience even wants to do, or even you yourself, like, we're kind of putting them into the game to like live in our game forever.
that is like, how does it feel to get that card? That, like, and you're holding that in your hand, like, that has to be deep.
It's been hard. There's been lots of times where I've just had to walk away. Like, I can't work on the game. You have to be in a really good mindset to work on a game like this, which gets into kind of the games that Fyrebite wants to be known for, that we want to make. And we set out very, very early to make games that tackle extremely tough topics that people are afraid to talk about, but deliver them in the format of a game which is relatable, and like a lot of people relate to them. So there's been a lot of talk about what our second game is going to be, amongst the owners. We have wanted to touch schizophrenia. We've wanted to touch dementia, would be a really hard one that I think would be important. And then I guess being a little like, you know, vulnerable myself, I actually about 5 years ago was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. and that has been like an up and down roller coaster for me. And we really wanted to do a game about bipolar, but at the end of the day, we don't want to offend anybody, right? If you touch something like bipolar disorder and you get it wrong, it's also like or you paint it in a negative light. It's a very delicate. Our next game, we have to be just very careful how we tiptoe around presenting, because not every case of mental illness is the same for every single person.
Yes, yeah.
My story might be completely different than somebody else's story. So, but yeah, overall, the theme of Fyrebite is tackling difficult topics that people don't want to talk about, but putting them into a video game.
You know, and I think that the way you were wording that, it makes a lot of sense too. Like cancer, you know, that's kind of just like, I wouldn't say black and white, but it's more black and white than mental illness. Like that's you know, everybody's their human, like, biological makeup, chemical, everything just works way different from person to person. But the way cancer usually affects everyone, you know, it's the stages of grief, you know, I think those are all very relatable. So I definitely see that. So what's coming for you in 2023? I know the release of this game's slated for this year, correct?
Yes. So we are trying to release, I mean, the Q1 ship is sailing a little bit, but it will be in the summer of in some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to give like an exact date, but it's really hard because like anything could happen.
Yeah.
So it'll release first Steam on PC with achievements, controller support, trading cards. Like we're doing the full Steam suite basically. I don't know if Chris watches this later, he might be mad at me for putting my foot in my mouth, but I do have a rough virtual reality build of the game working currently. There's no set expectation on when VR support is coming for Quest 2 and PC VR. I will say it's really cool to walk through the forest in virtual reality. It takes it up a notch.
I was gonna say, when I was playing it and knowing that you are really big into VR, I was like, this feels like it was just like the perfect game for it. Like watching the snow like fall in front of you would just be gorgeous.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that's like way later. That might even be 2024. So first it's gonna be early this year will be Steam on PC, and then we are looking at almost an immediate Android and iPhone port.
Oh, cool.
I think this game would work extremely well. Like we want to hit people that may have dealt with cancer but never played a game before, and that's also why the gameplay is super easy, as one might say, right? You walk around, you explore, it tells a story. Story leads over gameplay in this game, and I know that, and I'm not trying to defend it saying like, no, this is a hardcore video game. We want to make it super accessible, super easy to play. So that's the intention of mobile, so people can pick up the game and play it who maybe have never played a game before. And then depending on the success of all of that, like we had talked about consoles is a whole nother beast to get on. Nintendo Switch possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting the game runs on Steam Deck. I do have a Steam Deck build right now for it that is working. It runs at 60 frames. Battery life is good. Couple of weird tweaks with Linux that we have to work on, but it is fully playable as of right now on Steam Deck.
Let's go. So we talked about it being a couple hours long. What's the price point you guys are looking at?
So yeah, we were talking about 3 to 4 hours, and we were looking at coming in, and this is like super up for conversation still, but we were looking at launching Steam at about $12.
Not bad at all. I mean, these graphics are gorgeous. This game is, I cannot wait to get my hands on it when you guys drop it later on in the year. Josh, thank you so much for swinging by, breaking down this awesome game and your game studio. Before I let you go, I always love asking for a little bit of advice for anyone who's out there and listening and might be interested in getting into developing games. So with that being said, for anyone looking just to get started, what would be some of your best advice for them?
That's crazy because I have like super imposter syndrome about making video games.
You're doing it though. You're doing it, you know?
I would say to start first with just your story. If a story game is what you're going to make, I would start in Unity. There's a lot of tutorials for it, a lot of documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Dare I say, like, ChatGPT is kind of a decent help with Unity stuff. It's like super controversial. Like, AI people are probably cringing at me right now, but start with a story first. Start with a story game, and I would definitely make it single player. Like, don't get into multiplayer. Don't get into anything server based or just single player story driven game is probably your best bet to actually finishing a game. Because your first one, like, let it go to the world, and maybe make your second one your dream game. Don't work your dream game your very first game at all.
That's some awesome advice, Josh. Thank you so much for swinging by. Everyone watching, right here is the link to go to Steam. You could wishlist this now. It's free to wishlist. It's also free to take that link and put it on Facebook and Twitter and share it with all your friends and family. Word of mouth is 100% free, and getting this out as far as possible is what we're trying to do today. So with that being said, guys, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you all have an awesome day, but most importantly, keep it geekly.